it here, and then we'll just kind of continue the discussion and cut it maybe in another 45 minutes or so. All you guys can talk or whatever. But I'll start by explaining to people why I have found a loophole in my previous over-the-top statement.
No way. I keep hearing about over and over again.
Yeah, I know. So I did this blog post about a month ago, right when the D4 came out, coincidentally. And I really wasn't very excited about the D4. And I thought, is this all that's coming out of DSLRs in the future? And I've been really looking hard at all these mirrorless cameras, and they're not quite there yet. I've invested so much money in DSLRs that I thought, well, I really don't see myself spending any more money on DSLRs in the next few years. I'm just going to wait for these mirrorless cameras to amp it up a little bit, with Moore's Law and everything. I think that we're going to get an incredible mirrorless solution. It's really exciting in the next year or so. I actually still think by the end of 2012 that Sony may do something amazing. That makes me even more Sony curious than I already am. But then the D800 came out, and even though I said, I wasn't going to buy any more DSLR equipment, this is a loophole that I found in my previously ridiculous statement, and that was that, I said I wouldn't buy. Maybe I'm not really buying because I'll sell my D3S or my D3X, and since that's like an $8,000 camera or whatever, maybe I can get half price for it. And the D800 is so ridiculously cheap in comparison. It's $3,000. I'll end up saving $1,000 on the total transaction. So technically I'm not buying if I'm saving money. Oh, this is just a really long way of saying that I've changed my mind. And I'm going to get this D800. And now I don't have it yet. We've got at least 3 people in this Hangout that have the D800 and will probably hold it up to make me jealous right now. There's Colby. Colby Brown's got one. Bill Dodd has one, showing me that strap. And there's Scott Jarvie.
Bouncing on his head.
Yeah. Don't do that, Scott. You're making all of us nervous. All right, well, who's used it already? Who can make me really jealous? Scott, you've used it. Give us your prognosis.
And I've got a couple of pictures of the same tree, one in the day and one at night on the Google+.
Can't hear you, Jarvie.
What's that?
You're a little quiet.
All
We
right.
can kind of hear you, though.
All right, so my prognosis is it was great with focusing, very sharp pictures, and I rarely had blown out highlights. And the pictures are freaking huge, megabytes.
How big is the RAW file?
I'm coming across 40 megs pretty consistently, 40, 43.
Is that what you guys see, Colby and Bill?
Yeah, that's about right. I've only been playing around with it today. I just got it this afternoon, but it's somewhere around there. Yeah.
I wonder how many people now are like me and their first photo is always of their Apple keyboard.
Guilty.
Yeah. Bill Dodd, how big are your files, so to speak?
Hey, yeah, they're still running that same about 40, 45 meg. Of course, my first shots are this rose bush, this conspicuous rose bush outside of our house that we always end up shooting. And I actually gave the camera to my wife this morning, and she used it for a play date with the kids, and she liked it. So, unfortunately, I had to work, so she's got more use out of it today than I have.
Oh, well, that's nice of you.
So Trey,
Hello, welcome, Chris Chabot from Google. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. When I saw this topic, I just had to jump in. You changed your mind?
I did.
Like?
I changed my mind like a woman. It's only because I'm really in touch with my feminine side.
You didn't like the color of it? It didn't know what to use?
No, I think it's a really slick camera. Are you, Chris? Are you a Canon guy?
I am a Canon guy. I recently got a 5D Mark III.
Oh.
And so while I don't have any experience with the D800, it's the same kind of 3.5 year of technological improvement in it. And I've got to say the Mark III is absolutely fantastic as well.
Oh, by the way, this is a perfect reminder. Pull up that photo of your Mark III, what happened to it at the Festival of Colors, because this is the segue and the mention that Scott Jarvie next week will be hosting the show. Thank you, Scott. It's going to be all about the Festival of Colors, and you're going to invite, I'm sure, a lot of your compatriots on that mega photo walk in Utah with that huge event up there that people will love to hear about. So give us a little preview of what you're going to talk about, Scott.
Well, we'll go over the event, and then we'll have some of the people that came to the event share some of their pictures and their experiences using their cameras in such of an environment. And maybe that even kind of helps out people for the next similar event, which would be somewhat like Burning Man, correct?
Yes, it's a lot like Burning Man, but my camera never looked like Chris Chabot's. Chris!
Yeah, it was a bit colorful that day, which was interesting.
And that's your brand new camera.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny as well because I posted a picture taken on my phone at the event, and the title of it was, "Here's another picture of my brand new Mark III." And the majority of the comments were people freaking out when they saw this. So that was a fun event.
I like how you have the police tape around it, like it's a crime scene.
It almost is, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I kind of figured that there was
a chalk outline of your camera.
There should be yellow tape around it as well. I agree. I kind of figured that as long as I just tape shot all the openings on it, so the battery and memory card hatch and stuff, it should be fine. It's just cornstarch, and fortunately it did clean up and it's all good again. But yeah, it did look shocking for a day.
Yeah, very shocking. Very shocking.
But don't worry, like Thomas Hawk, you probably just licked the front of the lens to clean it.
I actually didn't. I used some cleaning fluid instead.
Oh.
I did like Thomas's picture. It was very provocative. He loves his camera, doesn't he?
No pun intended.
Maybe pun intended.
Well, Colby, what are you going to do with your D800 first?
Well, I had a bunch of big trips coming up and a bunch of big workshops I'm teaching kind of around the globe. So I just need to take it outside and actually learn the system. I've been a Canon shooter for 9 years and still have Canon systems. I'm actually dancing the line between the two. So I still have a 5D Mark II, which actually I'm selling, and I got a 1D Mark IV. And then next month I got a Canon sending me a 1DX to play with. And so I'm going to run with the 1DX and a D800 and split the lenses and just see how it goes.
Cool. Well, hey, tell people about your workshops in case they want to sign up.
Sure. Well, most of them are full already, but I'm going actually to Iceland with Ken Kameneski and Patrick Defruska, who you had on last night, I believe, for 2 weeks in May, and then I head from there directly to Peru to teach a workshop to 6 people, and that's already full. And then I head to Bolivia actually with Scott Jarvie for 2 weeks, doing some work down there and doing some scouting for another one of my organizations, The Giving Lens. And then I come back and I do 3 weeks in Nicaragua where we have 2 workshops back-to-back that are sold out. And then I head from there to Alaska for 10 days with a few people to another scouting trip, and then Tanzania after that. So unfortunately, there's no room in any of these workshops. They're already full. But
right. Well,
you can get on for next year.
Yeah, you need to get signups for next year. Sell out like those really exclusive restaurants in England where you have to sign up a year ahead of time and get reservations.
Yeah, Colby, let's start advertising our 2013 Bolivia workshop.
Before we go in the 2012 one.
Yes, exactly.
And Jim Davis, what's going on over there? Give us your musings.
Well, right now I'm currently I don't own a digital body that's working. My D3X is in the repair shop, and I sold my other body in anticipation of getting the D800E. So what I've done is I've got the D3X getting fixed. I'm going to sell that when it gets back. I've already got a buyer for it, and I'm going to order the D4. But I've got 3 or 4 workshops coming up that myself and Ron Clifford are doing it locally here in Ontario, up on the Bruce Peninsula, Flower Pot Island, and that type of thing. And I also, both Ron and I started up what we had going on before was the Nature Through Your Eyes Google Hangout show. So we had our first return show on Sunday night, which was a success. So we're really looking forward to amping that up.
Do you have any other workshops you want to mention that are available?
Right now we have the Flower Pot Island coming up in the first week of June. We're doing a summer workshop in Indian Head Cove along the shores of Georgian Bay the first week of July, and then we're going to do another one in fall. So now the one in the fall is going to be in Algonquin Park. We haven't set a final date for that because we don't know exactly how the weather is going to be, but we're aiming at the end of September.
Very cool. Very cool. By the way, I have no workshops.
Hey, I keep trying to tell you we need to do a joint one in Mongolia or something, but you're not returning my emails.
Actually, I don't spend much time. I only spend about like 10% of the year teaching stuff. Mostly, I'm just out shooting. I like it very much. I just don't dedicate much time to it. So,
Trey, we cordially invite you
to Bolivia.
I would, I would love to go.
There's room on the chicken bus for one more.
Good.
Yeah, no, desire is not the thing that's holding me back. But
You're about to move, aren't you? Or are you moved? You're not
yes,
moving now?
I'm in the middle of moving. All my stuff now is on a boat inside one of those giant, long containers, like I'm a Chinese exporter, and it's going through the Panama Canal on the way to New Zealand. So
That's exciting. Is that why we see a new surrounding behind you? It doesn't look familiar.
you will. Right now, I'm in my dad's house in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I leave tomorrow I have a speaking engagement. But yeah, I'm here for now. Hey, Jim, you mentioned you're getting the D800E. Why don't you talk to everyone about well, first, explain to people the difference between the 800 and the 800E, and then tell everyone why you got the E instead. I think people will be interested to know.
Yeah. Well, the D800 has what everybody knows as an anti-aliasing filter, which helps line up the way the pixels read fine patterns and things like that. It helps so that you don't get otherwise the sensor can't read it properly and you get funny, strange color patterns in fine clothing and things like that when they're being photographed. Whereas the D800E has no anti-aliasing filter, which allows for more of the detail of the image to come through. So based on the fact that I shoot mostly nature landscape, I don't really need an AA filter on the camera, and I would rather benefit from the added sharpness that will come through. And it's marginal, but if you're doing large prints, I think that you'll see the benefit of it. Most medium format cameras don't have the AA filters, and I've seen one of the friends that I shoot with, and Colby met him, is Mark Burnham, and he shoots with a Hasselblad. And obviously they're a top-notch camera, but the detail that you see in prints that are up to 7 feet long is absolutely amazing. So I think that's where the benefit is going to come. When obviously on the web you're not going to really notice a big difference, but when you start blowing up big prints, you'll definitely see the difference.
And that's kind of the thing where, like, the new Fujifilm X Pro 1 has got a new nifty implementation with a different pixel ordering to prevent this problem, so they can get away with not having that filter.
Yeah.
It's kind of also what makes the Leica M9 special, that they've done away with most of that filter. So it does make a difference.
Yeah. And from what I've seen in the difference between a camera shot with an AA filter and one without, in the application that I'm going to be using it for, it's not going to be an issue. There's none of that moire effect that happens for the most part in landscape photography.
Hey, Chris, tell us a little bit about this pixel ordering on the Fuji. I don't know what you're talking about.
So normally in a sensor is every pixel records one color. So there's a grid of RGB pixels, red, green, and blue, that when you combine all of that, it actually creates a color when it has those three colors combined, right? That's the RGB palette, as we call it on computers. So normally it's RGB, 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 and that repeats all over the sensor, and that's just a nice aligned grid of those three colors repeated. The problem with that is because of that grid layout, you get a Moore effect, those weird lines through the picture that look like it all distorted. That's because of that alignment within the sensor of it. So the Fujifilm X Pro 1, which is about to be released in the next couple of weeks, I think, at least that's the data I'm hearing. What they've actually done is that they've created a somewhat chaotic pattern in the way those pixels are aligned, those different colors. And that way they don't need that pre-pass filter to remove some of the detail to prevent that effect from happening because of that chaotic alignment. So that does mean that there's a lot more work in interpreting the data from that sensor, so you need much smarter ways of creating an actual image out of it. But it does allow them to resolve a lot more detail on it, like the M9s and the medium format cameras. So all of the benefits of not having a filter without the downside of being able to get that Moore effect.
Hey, Bill or Colby, there's a question here from Levi Sim. I'm watching the thread from the live thing. Levi says, the file size has been my concern. Have you had any trouble in Lightroom?
I can say that, file size wasn't a problem. I did have problems with Lightroom 3. I was still on 3 reading the raw format, even with the latest update. And so I had to go to 4 and re-register all the export plugins and all that kind of stuff. But and my Lightroom catalog actually lives on a Drobo USB connected, so it's far from fast, and the performance really hasn't been a problem. In fact, the raw files coming off of the D800 are about the same size as the raw files coming off of the Sony A77. Even though they're 24 megapixels versus 36, I guess Nikon's raw format's tighter, but no.
So you have an A77 also?
Yes.
All right. Well, let us hear your musings on DSLRs versus these new Sonys and new techs that are coming out. Where do you fall?
So I had a Lytro as well through the professional shooter program, and I've always shot crop sensor Nikon bodies, so D60, D90, D7000, and I got into the A77 because the D7000's video was terrible. The continuous autofocus, particularly if I'm going to use it for, shooting kids and their lightsaber battles in the backyard or whatever, it just didn't work out. And so I went to an X5 for a while, and I thought the sensor in the camera was fine. The glass was the problem, right? And so I said, well, let's just move up. So we went to the A77. The video on the A77 was amazing. Autofocus, continuous autofocus tracking is great because of the translucent mirror. It doesn't have to flop the mirror all the way up to track the image to do the contrast-based autofocus. It can just do it, right? And then, the camera's been great. I like it a lot. I think, as far as a tech, though, so the SLT tech, right, has loses some light because of the pass-through in the mirror, and so I think that's been a concern that I've read about. But I guess I have seen it, like ISO 6400 on the A77 versus the D800, which I guess isn't a fair comparison, but the D800 seems a lot clearer noise-wise. But the A77 was comparable to the D7000, which was, had mirror flippy stuff going on. So, I think, to round it up, I'd just say that I hope that there's some future where you've got, maybe some amalgamation of, light field imaging and mirrorless things, and like we kind of mentioned before, I wouldn't mind even seeing an Apple emblem on the side of the camera, but that's just me.
Yeah, I wish Apple would make cameras too. Hey, Helen or Keith or Ken, you guys have been kind of, or Joel, you guys have been kind of quiet. You guys want to?
No, I'm just taking it all in. I'm reading about the 800 at the same time we're all talking about it. So.
I'd just like to say that I recently upgraded from drooling after 5D Mark II to drooling after a 5D Mark III. So
I'm in the same boat as Helen.
Let me bring this up. I'm going to show my screen here. Okay, this is maybe Colby can talk to this because he's got a foot in both worlds. And maybe some of you others do too. This is a great site. I use it all the time. It's called Snapsort, and you compare cameras. This is the 5D Mark III versus the D800. And someone mentioned this in the thread too. Who was it that asked? Rajesh Karthikeyan said, is the D800 the equivalent of the 5D Mark III? And so here's the comparison. Tell me how accurate this is. Colby, let's look at this. This is kind of my first time.
Well, I mean, statistically, I mean, obviously this is accurate statistically, but I don't think they're necessarily direct competitors just because they sort of came out along the same time. I mean, it seems like the Nikon D800, especially after the conversation we were just having, talking about Moray and AA filters and just the high megapixel, it seems like this is Nikon's first step into starting to tread into medium format digital land. You know, just kind of test the waters, see how it goes. The Mark III is a significant upgrade from the Mark II, but it's certainly not in that direction. I mean, the benefits of the two are quite different. Where the 800, you have the higher megapixels, so you can blow up prints. You also have a much wider dynamic range, and then you have the 5D Mark III, which has much better autofocusing than the 5D Mark II, which was horrible. I have it, as much as I dislike it. But the new low ISO or high ISO, low light performance on the Mark III is actually quite astounding, and I think that it will blow the D800 out of the water in that, and obviously the D800 I think will be quite a bit better in the dynamic range. And
I have to say that the per pixel sharpness of the Mark III is also surprising to me. Yeah. Like I just posted a whole bunch of pictures from the Festival of Colors, and when I zoom in to a pixel level detail on those snapshots, which were like in the moment, people moving around, colors flying everywhere, if I zoom in, I can count every hair in somebody's eyebrow. It is pixel perfect. It is mind-blowingly stunning. Right. And that's something that I never had with any other camera that I've ever owned, where when you look at it at a pixel level, that it's still 100% perfect. So even though it doesn't have the megapixel count, the sharpness is definitely there. I wouldn't feel restricted doing large prints with it.
Right.
Sorry, Chris, your cat's distracting in the background.
I have a question about the HDR capabilities of the Mark III. Has anyone used that?
So my experience with that is that it's better, but for a different reason than you might think. So the Mark III does in-camera HDR. What it does, it takes 3 shots, and it combines that using its own internal software and hardware into a JPEG image. Now the JPEG image is actually the downside for me because I prefer using RAW files. So it producing a JPEG for me isn't necessarily useful. I prefer having a bit more control over it, process it in Lightroom, etc. Right? The big improvement, on the other hand, is that the Mark II was only able to take 3 frames when you were doing bracketed shots. The new thing with the Mark III is that it can do 2, 3, 5, or 7 bracketed shots. So if you have a really high dynamic range, you can get the full tonal range in there. So that's a big step up in my book.
Well, that makes sense to me, and that's let me stop sharing my screen. I'm sorry. That's consistent with everything I've heard and always thought about these in-camera HDR solutions, because pretty much every HDR algorithm is wrong in certain ways. Right. And the way I process my HDR photos is I take all the files that come out of the camera, and then I use an HDR algorithm, which is a distant cousin to whatever HDR algorithm is inside a lot of cameras. But what comes out of that algorithm is always a mess. You know, about 70%, maybe let's say 50 to 70% of it is interesting, and then the other 30 to 50% is just a train wreck, right? And what I do then is I bring them both into Photoshop, and then I bring back one of the original RAWs, or maybe multiple of the RAWs, and then I remix and bring back some of the original photo, especially the sky or things that the HDR algorithm just gets consistently confused in. And there is something about the human mind and something about taste, and obviously we all have different levels of taste for HDR or whatever. But I don't think the algorithm that's in the camera is basically sort of designed by committee, right? And they'll make something that is, you know, just a little bit HDR-y, not that interesting. Oftentimes it might make mistakes or be flat, and like you said, Chris, it spits out a JPEG, which is almost like you're taking this super expensive camera and you're letting it like come up with some sort of automated Instagram-like filter.
Whatsoever.
You know, why would you do that to your photo? Leave the post-processing to the computer. There's no need for it to happen on the camera.
Right. Agreed. So I quickly wanted to share my screen for one moment for this image. Sure. Now, I don't think you can see this really well on the Hangout, but this is basically a one pixel zoom on a larger image that I took. And the thing that impresses me, this is on a Mark III, is that you can count every hair and you can see every little detail. Now, I've never had this on a Mark II or any of the other cameras that I've owned, so I was really impressed by this. Like, you'll see that when I zoom out, this is the larger picture. So it's really a huge step forward, even though it doesn't have the huge megapixel count that a D800 has.
Do you think that part of that is just because of its ability to focus a lot better on the new camera?
It does help, of course, but even when you compare in-focus pictures, you still get the same effect.
I want to chime in real quick and just thank you guys, because I've always wondered what the difference is. I like Colby. I shoot with a D800S, and I borrow my friend's 5D Mark II. So I try to go between the two, because I always figure, you know, as long as you know what you're doing with respect to compositional strategies and what have you, it really doesn't matter what camera you use to some degree. But you guys have clarified a big question that I had was, I was thinking of buying, I want to get into a full-frame SLR, and I was thinking of buying a used D700, but I wonder what the big difference was between the FX format and a 12 megapixel versus the FX format and the 36, and you guys have basically just clarified that for me, and I appreciate that.
Of course.
Well, and I think that the basic assumption that your camera doesn't matter is still a correct one. Yeah. I mean, the analogy that I always use, and it might be the wrong one, but it resonates with me because I'm impressed with his work, is, do you think anybody went to Michelangelo and asked him what paintbrush he used? You know? That's completely irrelevant. It's up to the artist to come up with the image you're creating, right? And it could be a Lytro or a mobile phone, it could be a $10,000 camera system. Right. A great image will be a great image no matter what equipment you're using to build it. On the other hand, I mean, better equipment does give you some freedom, right? You'll have a bit more dynamic range and colors, and you can make larger prints, and there is a reason to buy that camera, but it won't make you a better photographer.
Right.
I think that's the thing I wanted to highlight, because I do worry that some people buy a more expensive camera and then they think, now I'm going to take awesome pictures. And it turns out it doesn't make a difference at all, because they were just pointing the camera, pressing the button without ever thinking about what makes a beautiful picture.
Right. I've actually done some workshops with educators in which I use this right here, and I show them a comparison, and like you said, it's still, you know, I always say the best camera is what you have right here. And as long as you can follow some of the basic principles of composition and what have you, like you said, it really doesn't matter.
Well, I think we live in I think the photo industry in general is very gear obsessed, and I think that, you know, I don't think it necessarily doesn't necessarily help that a bunch of us that do this professionally also kind of get wrapped up in it as well. But I think that, for me, something that I always teach to my workshop students is that you should never necessarily upgrade your gear, whether that's your lenses or your camera, so you feel that you're actually limited creatively. So if you sit there and you get to a point and you're like, okay, with this camera, with this lens, I can't shoot this night photography that I want to get into because I just can't have a low ISO performance, or I don't have, faster autofocusing, so I can't do sports. And obviously those are creative limitations for the tool that you have, which is your gear. But I think too many people, as Chris said, have that mentality. And I get that question, and Trey, I'm sure you probably get it a little bit more than I do, but I get hundreds of emails a week from people asking all sorts of random questions, and the majority of the time it's, hey, I'm just getting into photography. What camera should I have? What lens should I have? Or even worse is, which camera should I get to make me a better photographer? And it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which car should I get to be a better driver?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You're right, Colby. It's tough, and we're in the middle of this transitionary period, and that's part of the reason I wrote that article, because I wanted people to maybe stop spending so much money on DSLR equipment and save up and wait, because I think some amazing stuff is coming at a very low price. And if you have a good eye, if you're a photographer that has a good eye and you're interested and curious, you'll be able to do amazing work with some of these new cameras that are coming out and not have to worry about these giant bodies and giant lenses and all this nonsense. And you can travel light and save your back and not feel trapped by this giant investment in this system that you've been building up over your whole life. And I think that whole idea of having a system or an allegiance to a company, I think that's going to fall away in the next few years.
Well, Canon or Nikon don't pay me enough in order to have my allegiance to either. So that's why I use my allegiance is to my customers and clients, and that's why I use what gear works for me.
Yes, I'll take this opportunity to say something bad about Nikon. So Nikon, I'm a member of NPS, which is Nikon Professional Services, and they sent me this email, I guess about a month or 6 weeks ago, and they said, hey, because you're NPS, you're eligible to get a D800 early. And I go, oh, thank God, finally, I get some kind of benefit of being NPS. There's something. Right? They don't give me cameras or anything. I buy like everybody else. Anyway, so I thought, oh, okay, what do I do? What's the action item in this email? What do I click on? So I found it, I clicked on it, and then I had to go log into NPS's website. This website was made in like 1999, and it's an awful website. And so anyway, I finally get in there. It takes me forever to recover my passwords. I never have to. So I get in there, and then there's this web form, which might have been designed in 2001. And I had to go in there and say, like, okay, I want the D800 and put in some information and go, okay, now I'm in the queue. I'm going to get something early. I'm all excited. And then I get a call maybe last week or 2 weeks ago or something. They said, oh, we're ready to get you a camera, a D800, but we need to know where to ship it. You need to have a local dealer. So I said, okay, well, I'm not exactly sure where I'll be then. I think I'll be in Dallas. So I contacted a local camera shop here in Dallas, and I called them up, and I said, okay, I got a call from NPS. They want me to see if a local dealer will hold a camera for me. And they said, NPS? Yeah, sure, we'll hold the camera for you. So then I called back NPS, and I said, okay, I found a camera store, Wolf Camera, here in Dallas, and they said they'll hold the camera for me. And they said, oh, okay, that's great, but you have to have a pre-order with them. I said, oh, okay, well, you didn't tell me that, but that's fine. So then I took one of my, we have a few employees here I could tell this was starting to get complex, so I handed it off to an employee. And I said, okay, go get a pre-order there, and then here's the person to contact NPS, tell them we have a... So then they contacted back, and then NPS said, oh, we need proof that there's a pre-order, so we had to get a copy of it and get it sent around. So there's a lot of people, there's this email chain in Gmail, which is now like, it has like NPS with a 14 in parentheses, which means it's like a long... So now it's going on and on and on, And meanwhile, everyone, 3 people in here, I don't have my D800 yet. I don't know where it is. I haven't heard a thing. My friends are calling me. They're like at a Best Buy in Seattle or where they go, hey, we got D800s here. I'm like, what? So, I mean, what good is all this trouble I went through with NPS? I don't even know what's going on.
One of the things that is so entertaining to me, and that's kind of, I might be mixing shows here, but I think you were on a show yesterday about how digital sharing is different than copyrights currently allow, right? And as I was watching that show, I kind of remembered where Obama had a big tiff because he was using mobile phones and social media. And he couldn't do that as a president anymore, because as a president, everything you write becomes part of the official records of everything that the president has produced. And there's like this big theme through all of this where our legislation and a lot of our old conceptions are based on the old world. Writing something was an involved process with pen and paper and books and envelopes and stamps. And if you send a letter, then you meant to send a letter, right? It was a big heavyweight process. Nowadays, you're chatting in IM or G+, and it's more like a water cooler kind of chat. Likewise, when you're sharing something digitally, it's more like saying, hey, look, this is pretty. And it's not like making a copy that's a heavyweight and involved process. And you see the same kind of thing happening, and this is kind of the segue for me, where I recognize the same type of behavior with Nikon and Canon, where there's still old world companies that don't necessarily recognize digital photographers who are sharing digital pictures and prints and using social media like you, Trey, because you're one of the biggest Nikon people that I know on Google+, where people go, wow, what camera does Trey use? And that's the camera I want to use as well. So you have a big impact there, but they should be calling you and saying, Trey, please take our camera. And instead you're chasing after them to try to get a camera.
Well, I agree.
It seems like a weird situation.
I don't ask for anything like that. I think it'd be okay if I did, but you're right. Nikon and Canon and Sony and Fuji, everybody, they should have cameras sitting on Colby's doorstep every week when they have something coming out. They should have something on Jim Davis's doorstep. They should have something on Scott Jarvie's doorstep. I mean, you can name. I mean, take the top, 500 photographers that are followed, and across all these things. They should all be getting loaners or freebies or whatever. It doesn't change. I swear to God. I mean, I know this is me, and I know Scott Jarvie pretty well. I know Colby Brown pretty well. I know almost everybody pretty well. And if we were to get a couple cameras from Nikon or Canon, it wouldn't change our opinion. We're too busy, right? We will use the best thing for us, whether or not we buy it or it's given to us. And we'll also recommend our favorite, whether or not we buy it or it's given to us. None of that nonsense even matters. But it's a little bit. I don't know if insulting is the right word, but that they send it to all these magazine editors that have inflated publisher numbers, that have all this stuff going on. It just doesn't make sense.
Your reach is 1,000 times higher than most of those magazines. I remember you ran an experiment with advertising in a magazine and doing some stuff on the web. And the results were that advertising in magazines isn't necessarily the most effective thing to do anymore. I think those camera companies should at some point wisen up to that reality as well.
Well, I think a lot of periodicals or a lot of companies, not just camera companies, are starting to realize the importance of social. I mean, obviously, look at Google and Facebook. Obviously, Google and Facebook are competing ultimately for some sense of ads and personalization and all these different types of pieces. And then you have large networks like the Matador Network. So their Matador Network is one of the largest travel websites in the world. And what they've started to do is they're moving away from this kind of stagnant ad clicking, which as far as the online world is kind of the same equivalent to magazine articles for periodicals, and they're moving more to content-based advertising or marketing, if that's what you want to call it. So instead of doing a one-click, hey, come to this resort, it's, hey, let's write an article, let's do a full expose, a full story, and this lives on the internet for 10 years from now and becomes the #1 search every time you look for, a resort in Cancun, whatever it is. And it's the same type of principle, the idea that social aspects play a huge role, and I think that I still think we're a few years away from a big drastic change, but it's like anything. I mean, look at the switch between digital and film. I mean, how long that took and the fight that happened, and there's big money involved, so it's going to be a little bit of a change.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's interesting you guys mention that, because that's part of one of the things that I always talk about, because I work in education. So if you can imagine how slow it is for these companies, just imagine how it is in education. And I teach technology, so for me, it's like you guys said, it's not following the old, what I call the old archaic model, considering how fast things are changing and how accessible things are. And like Colby said, it's more a function of how can you increase the consumer experience so that it becomes a more holistic approach to whether it's a product, a service, or things of that nature.
People don't want marketing pitches. I mean, that's the whole thing that I've learned with social media through 8 years of being a photographer, is that I see some people that are from the old school photographer, and this is not a derogatory term, but definitely from a different generation. And for those people that do not understand the social aspect of things, and that they sit there and just because they have big names in the industry and they try to just only promote like their own stuff, or sit there and you do a post about hey, I have this workshop coming up, but there's nothing else. It's just like it's just a slap in the face, and people are aware of that. People are getting more and more educated online and in the digital world every day. And I think that people have to learn to get past that. And anytime someone sees just a straight ad in your face, in my personal opinion, for the most time, it's a turnoff. Yeah, they want to go somewhere else. So.
One of the really big changes, and I apologize for all these intellectual perspective interruptions, it's just endlessly fascinating to me. One of the big changes is that we're going from a broadcast media, the TV station, a newspaper, the magazine, to a many-to-many conversation, right? We're all talking to each other, all millions of us through the internet. Right. And that's changed what we expect as well, because we used to see an ad in a newspaper. Now we can talk to each other. So what we're expecting from companies is to treat us like people. We don't want to see an ad in our face and they run away again. We want to hear from them every day. We want to have a human relationship with them. It's now important that you have hundreds of little social interactions to build your brand affiliation. Like Trey and Colby and Scott and pretty much everyone here is really good at that. You're interacting with people, and that's building your brands, to use an old-fashioned term. Because people, if Colby has a workshop, they go, I know him. He's commented on my post, I've commented on his post, I've seen his pictures. We have a social relationship over the last few months with each other, and you feel a friendship and an affinity. Right. You wouldn't go to his workshop because you saw his ad in a bus stop.
Right.
So it's a completely different experience, and that's true for everyone here, that we're kind of that new order that's building relationships with people, that we are those people by definition, because we're in a freaking Hangout instead of on the TV,
For sure.
Well, here's an example of that. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Like, I'm very new to the photography world and whatnot, and the people that I know that are high up in the photography world are people like Scott and Trey and all of you guys and Colby, because of social media. I've only known you guys through Google Plus, Facebook, Twitter, and things like that. And I don't know many of those the old style photographers because I haven't got to know them through these social media outlets.
Yeah. Not only do you know them, but you're actually able to connect to them and interact and learn from them directly.
Well, exactly. That's why I'm so excited
hang
to
out
be in
with
here.
them right now, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, look at social media. I mean, obviously, we're in a Google Hangout, so obviously, I don't want to toot Google's horn too much. But I mean, look at the approach that Google has done with Google Plus, with community managers, with people like yourself, Chris, who do get involved at a granular level of interaction on a daily basis with all these people, and you don't do it because it's forced, because I think that's obvious. That's obvious. You do it because you enjoy it, and I think that shows. And I think a lot of the other social networks, Facebook, Twitter, are starting to realize that. I'm starting to get contacts from other social networks that are trying to play catch up to that. I mean, Google Plus and Google Plus in general still has a ways to go with different things, and I know you guys have your own timeline, but other networks are seeing what's happening here and wanting to replicate those pieces because they understand the value. And the same thing's happening for every company out there, I believe. And that's why customer service is all of a sudden a really big, really high, again, on the importance levels, because If I can sit there on Twitter and I have a problem with UPS and I get, tracking gets screwed up or something like that, I can tweet out to UPS saying, UPS shipment fail or something like that. Within 60 seconds, I will have someone from UPS contacting me, asking me to resolve the question, and that's something that we have never had before.
Nice.
And I think that's something to take into account from no matter what size of company you are. People pay attention to that, and I think it's important. So.
Well, guys, I should wrap this up. We can stop talking about how awesome we are for. Thanks to you guys for all your opinions and stuff on the D800 and Nikon and Canon and that sort of thing. I do need to go ahead and end the broadcast, otherwise it won't let me edit it on YouTube, because I think within an hour and a half I have to it's a big problem. But I'll end the broadcast and I'll come back in and start it up again. But as for the official recording, I'll just kind of end it now. So. Anyway, before we stop, I know Scott has some thing he wants to plug called a photo decathlon or something. Scott, yes?
Yeah, of course. In October, I just finished this big event with 20 or 30 photographers coming in from out of state here, and I'm ready to start up, get another one going, but even much bigger. So in October 8th in Utah, which is it's the fall season with the fall colors, we are doing a photography decathlon. It starts off with an educational day, and then there's followed by 2.5 days where the set of teams, like 30 teams, will go out and photograph in 10 different styles. So like landscape, portraiture, street photography, macro, architecture, 10 different styles of photography, and bring back a small portfolio from each one of them and kind of submit them. And we're going to be soon deciding on a set of 10 ambassadors that act as educators and judges, and just kind of this whole week event where people will be able to socialize, learn and grow, and to push themselves to be awesome through a goal of trying to be great, and just kind of some camaraderie. That'll be in October. So they should look out for more news about that.
Cool. Thank you, Scott. That was an amazing plug.
And can I just add that Scott really does organize the most awesome events, and I think Colby can plus one it as well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And he's a character. Come on. I mean, I don't have cable service in my house anymore. I mean, my family don't like it, but I could sit there and would totally pay for a 24-hour just webcam of Jarvie land and just see what happens. So.
Yeah, I also vouch for Scott Jarvie. He's a good guy. The first time you may, encounter him, it may seem like something's a little bit off with the fella. It's actually like in a really pleasant way, and also my wife likes him. And if my wife likes somebody, it's pretty much just this guaranteed seal of approval, universal awesomeness.
Definitely.
So I don't know what you did, Scott, but she likes him.
Well, not only does my wife like him, but also my 7-month-old son loves Jarvie. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, definitely. Same here.
Yeah. He's sort of like the tapioca pudding of the internet. Okay, anyway, I'll end with this one image. Someone sent this. This is in my... This is in the thread for this thing. A guy named... Let me share my screen, I'm sorry, so you guys can see what I'm looking at. This fellow's name is Toby Harriman. He said, "This was the craziest image that I've seen that you could do with a new D800. This is so here it is. I'm pulling it up here. So here you can say, this is the D800, okay? And you can see him here in the eye of this creature, which we're not sure what it is, until we scroll down, and then we see the bird right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the
really
sweetness of
impressive.
Wow.
36
Nice.
megapixels.
That's
Nice.
I saw that earlier.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Jarvie.
All right, everybody. So I'm going to come right back into the broadcast, but I'm going to click in broadcast for now, and that'll end the recording. Okay, so everyone just wave a nice goodbye from your Brady Bunch boxes down there. Okay, bye.